I would like to share with you all my spiritual journey. Um, I am very nervous at the moment because I feel that communicating with others, stories that are very personal, that are very vulnerable, that mean so much to me emotionally, spiritually. It's just a hard process, but I decided a while back that I wanted to start putting my thoughts into image, and um, because to me, my spiritual journey was very much about how I saw myself, what my vision was, and um, the reality, the visual reality, and the visual nature of the world always gaslighted me. And so I felt that I had a blurry vision about what life was, how it was significant, how it made sense. I feel that I often communicate in a way that maybe gets too broad and too confusing, and it is a quality that comes through my life in other areas, not just in communication. Like, I feel that where I grew up was a space of fogginess. It had a lot of water energy. I am from the border of Texas. Um, I grew up in Mexico, in a state called Tamaulipas, and in a part of Mexico where the ocean meets the river, right? And as well as Texas meets the ocean and the river, the very southern, easternmost tip of Texas and corner of Mexico. And so I felt that somehow I was affected by the elements surrounding me. And so that's a shitload of water. And then around the 2000s, I was growing up in Tamaulipas, and there was suddenly a drug war, right? So the environment became extremely temperamental, extremely violent, extremely toxic. I mean, it had always been patriarchal, but before I felt like it was more subtle and in a more traditional way. People communicated with nature, and people had rituals every day, and they were friendly to their neighbors, so that there was a sense of community. Um, I grew up in a farming community, actually, so it was also a very rural area of Mexico, of the border. Um, um, so I felt like all these elements kind of affected how I saw the world and how my narrative developed. When I was 10 years old, I became aware of darkness in a very depressive, violent, and deadly way. Um, my father was murdered by an American policeman at the border of Texas in a town called Elsa. Um, and this completely transformed and turned my life upside down. My father had always been like a figure of uh, darkness in my life, but I loved him. So darkness gave me light. My father was a very possessive Scorpio sun person. He was very intense. He crossed people and weed across the border, and he also was very toxic and very abusive, and was always looking for fights and conflicts with everyone and everything. He was so angry at the world, but he acted his anger out in very manipulative um, games, and they were very like, his manipulation was very patient, and so he knew what he was doing. So that's how I experienced my father, despite me loving him so much and thinking that he was the most intelligent, witty man. And he was so risky and dreamlike and always traveling back and forth, right? He would go to the US, he would take a plane without having any documents from Houston, which is something that before was easier to do it, but he was also just willing to do just risky things And that quality exaggerated him into being participant in the war of drugs. Um, and this was, obviously, my father wasn't like a big drug dealer. He was like a servant of drug lords. Um, so he was always um, confined by his poverty mentality and his race, the color of his skin specifically, and how he was perceived by society, right? So when he was murdered by this policeman, it was just another shock and a wave of surprise, and it broke my heart completely. Like my chakra, my heart chakra, it died. It died on me, and then because my father's dreams were that I did good in school, and I eventually get a job as maybe a teacher or something, and have a better life than he had. Because those were his dreams, I decided that I was going to heal and that I was going to be very intelligent. I mean, that I was going to be very intelligent and that I would be successful in some way or somehow. But then I also realized that I couldn't do shit because I was so heartbroken. And this was 10-year-old me, right? So I start thinking about the way I feel and how I can make myself feel better if maybe I just talk or write it or put it out of my body in some way, because it's poison, right? You have to take it out of the body. Fire, water element coming into very like still situation there, I feel. So then I started healing. I would journal, I would write letters to my father, I would do all these little rituals of intentions that I wanted to put forward. I was in 6th grade or 5th grade. Yeah, I think it was 5th grade when this fucking kid opened one of my notebooks and read a letter that I had written to my father. And I was shamed for it, but they were also like, wow, she's intense. So that continued until I was 18, and then I had to leave home and had to go through other energetic cycles that I will talk about later. But by 18, I felt that I was already a healer and that I was very intuitive and that I was very emotionally aware. And I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to share my ideas and my thoughts and my passion and the way I saw the world, right? But the thing is, I didn't understand vision, right? And I wanted to share with people how I saw the world, right? And how I experienced it. So, but I didn't understand vision or even being practical. I didn't understand very simple things, right? I've always had bad eyesight too, and so I felt that these elements of fogginess and confusion and like really passive aggressive violence and manipulation, and then very direct aggression, right? When the drug war started in Tamaulipas, and my family and people of my community started to die in very violent ways. That's when I felt that those elements had to be reconstructed in some way, and I had to deal with the type of personality qualities that they had created in me. But I guess what I mean to say is that my spirituality and my spiritual journey started with death and the nature of change that is violent and surprising and you don't expect it. And it's coming from social structures that are very toxic, that are very designed and motivated to corrupt and to tear down and to break hearts And I feel that because I made that connection in my mind, there was an energy I was channeling already. And sometimes it was subconscious, some other times it was not subconscious, and I was very in control. But I didn't think about it. I would just act it out, or I would do it. And it came through me making a personal connection to that nature of change, of transformation, of the world falling around in pieces surrounding you, right? And because your universe, well, I felt that my universe was so limited. It was my father, and then my home, and my grandmother. That was my spiritual education, but it was also a very limited perception of life. And when right now I live in Austin, Texas, and when I came to Austin, it felt just so weird, and that's when like I felt so limited and so close-minded and so little, right? So that's when I started thinking about like really what my vision was, and coming to terms with the fact that I wanted to put it out in video, and I wanted to talk to people, and also that that it just okay. This is hard to express, so please be patient. My own ability to recognize how exactly I was confined um, allowed me to begin manifesting a spiritual journey, because before it had all been like behavior that I had never consciously named. But then afterwards, it was very much intentional. It was an intentional process, and I started meeting people who were also spiritual. I started being guided by certain symbolisms in nature, and understanding like, the nature of elements and all these other details that go towards understanding the world in a spiritual sense. I think I really had the journey of the student. You know, some people, like, I feel like they're thrown in spiritual situations just by being such enigmatic, courageous people, but I felt like I was born from those situations, but I don't think I project myself to be that. I feel that I am a very grounded person. And now I'm rambling, which is the thing I do all the time. I mean, and you would know from my Instagram stories. Please follow me. I don't even know. I mean, I guess my Instagram followers would be watching